If you were looking for a year of extraordinary events in politics, 2016 had it all. Even a former Labour Chancellor dressing up in sequin shirts and tight trousers. Rather more seriously, it was the year when Britain went for a Brexit and Kent was centre stage in the debate. Here's our look back at the highlights over the last 12 months in a special edition of Paul on Politics. In our first edition, we took stock of Kent's changing political landscape since the election in 2015. Guest Professor Tim Luckhurst of the Centre for Journalism and Medway Council opposition Labour leader Vince Mabel had sharply contrasting views on the prospects for Labour under Jeremy Corbyn.
I think that the Labour Party has got a colossal mountain to climb here in Kent. It's not inconceivable, but several things need to happen, and they need to happen quickly. Firstly, we have to acknowledge a simple truth. Labour, with Jeremy Corbyn as leader, is unelectable. Corbyn doesn't even want to be Prime Minister. He wants to be the leader of an ideologically pure socialist sect. So the Labour Party is going to have to change its leader, and I am not the only person in British politics who knows that to be a fact. Jeremy Corbyn is less popular than William Hague was as leader of the Conservative Party, less popular than Michael Foot at the nadir of his leadership of the Labour Party. So for a start, Labour needs to make the internal changes urgently and now.
Well,
I mean, look, Karen Constantine in Thanet says that Jeremy Corbyn's Labour is electable. We're winning in Thanet, which was the only
but history
UKIP
and
council in the
all
country.
electoral evidence says it isn't, Vince. And there's another point. For Labour to make a comeback in Kent and to restore the two-party balance, which we have seen historically here, it has to be a credible party of government. I said that the first stage in that is having a credible leader, but the second stage is having real electoral prospects. Let's face it, the Labour Party's fortunes will not be decided here. They'll be decided north of the border in Scotland. Without the 50 seats Labour used to have in Scotland, they have to win in England seats that they haven't won since 1945. Now that is a huge challenge, and until that is resolved, I think Labour's prospects are distinctly worrying.
what about UKIP? Because we know a lot of people sided with UKIP, possibly from Labour's supporters. Has the purple balloon burst, or is it being deflated? Because it built up with tremendous momentum since the European elections and the council elections, and then...
Paul, I think it's the crucial point. The reason I don't say that Labour is finished in the South East is because I think that UKIP's fortunes are in decline. They're in chaos too. Their leadership doesn't know what it's doing, and there's a huge elephant on the horizon. It's called the referendum on Britain's membership of the European Union. If the Conservative Party leads Britain into Brexit, UKIP no longer has any purpose. So I think that there is all to play for in Kent politics, but the big challenges are on the left, because I don't see UKIP replacing Labour as the party of opposition here, and I really don't see the Liberal Democrats making any progress whatsoever.
And do you think Nigel Farage is going to stay on as leader?
I think that Nigel Farage may well stay on as leader, but if by doing so he renders his party less popular electorally than it might otherwise be, he won't be doing any favour to those in UKIP who want it to be more than an anti-European protest movement.
As the shows went on, we explored whether plans for a huge lorry park off the M20 would solve Operation Stack. Ben Kennedy had the story.
It's an image we'd all rather forget. Hundreds of lorries stacked up on the M20, causing mind-numbing delays for drivers. So the government came to the rescue, or at least thought they did.
As my right honourable friend knows, this summer Operation Stack brought Kent to a standstill.
We're making a £250 million commitment to the County of Kent to help them with this traffic problem and provide a permanent solution.
What was that permanent solution? To spend that £250 million on a lorry park with room for 3,600 lorries. It would sit right next to the village of Stanford, who've been up in arms about it, claiming their peaceful world could be shattered by the plans.
From a more uncertain point of view, I think there's quite a concern about would it bring any crime or unsavoury behaviour to the village. I mean, you've only got to look at the littering and the refuse left all over our landscape at the moment from lorry drivers.
What is astonishing is that the very businesses that this scheme was designed to help have come out publicly to criticise it. Eurotunnel recently said that it simply won't work, that the 35-day stackathon which we saw last summer was all to do with the Calais migrant crisis, and that was something which was completely unprecedented. Meanwhile, the Port of Dover said they had similar reservations that what was needed was a wider strategic plan, not just building a lorry park. And that might involve things such as widening the roads on alternative routes through Kent.
Even if the lorry park was built, there's also a risk that it would struggle to cope in years to come.
Well, freight traffic has increased massively over the last few years, particularly because of improvements in the UK economy, and we see that trend set to continue over the years to come. So potentially we could see a bigger impact when there is disruption across the channel.
Highways England still need to decide which proposed sites they prefer to build on, whether it's this one on the east side of the village or whether it's one on the opposite side. But whatever they choose, the question still remains. Is parking thousands of lorries in a field like this really a sensible solution, or is it, as some companies are now even suggesting, cracking the nut with a sledgehammer? Ben Kennedy, KMTV, Stanford.
As EU referendum fever took hold, we got a foretaste of just how polarised the debate would be, and reporter Lauren Meakin took to the streets of Medway to find out what we really know about what happens in Brussels and those urban myths about bent bananas.
Do you think it's true or false that bendy bananas are banned by the EU?
Bendy bananas? No, I've never heard of it. Don't know what you're talking about.
False.
Partially true.
Not even real?
What's a bendy banana?
It could be. I don't really know, but I wouldn't have thought so.
Was it true or false that farmers under EU law were forced to buy toys for their pigs?
I don't know, I don't think so.
Human rights laws would disappear?
No, because it's part of the European Court of Human Rights. It's nothing to do with the EU. What's the EU?
It's true or false that British expats living in European countries under the EU, would they then become illegal immigrants?
No, that wouldn't happen. I'm not too sure about that, really. I'm not really too sure.
Yeah, they'd have to come back. All the expats would have to come home.
If we left the EU, what do you think will happen to Premier League football players that are from Europe? Do you think they would leave? True or false?
I would think that's false.
Could we leave the EU in a day? What do you think?
No, I think it'll take a long time.
True or false?
I think that's false.
True or false that the EU have banned bagpipes?
Obviously false.
It's true if it's like a noise pollution thing. If they play it over 8 hours for a long
Over 8 hours? Who play bagpipes for over 8 hours?
So do you think it would be true or false that if we left the EU, 3 million jobs would disappear?
Do I have to give true or false? We just don't know, do we?
Unsure of that one. Would they disappear?
I don't think so. I think they'll get more jobs. Not sure on that one.
With a date set for the referendum, the only thing we're sure of is that we're a little bit confused.
Oh, right, OK.
Yeah.
I'll take your word for that.
This is Lauren Meakin for KMTV.
On the sofa, our guests were the Ashford MP Damien Green, a Europhile, and South Thanet MP Craig McKinley, a Eurosceptic. And there was, unsurprisingly, something of a clash, particularly on the issue of whether a vote to leave would mean control of the UK's borders returning to our shores.
Well, I'd say there is nothing to fear from leaving the EU because there is a global world out there. You know, are we really to believe that the owners of BMW, Mercedes, the Danish bacon industry, are they going to stop selling us their products if Britain were to leave the European Union? I don't know if you're the same as I am. I buy products because they're the right price and the right quality, and I'm sure that's the same of Mr. Allen. He provides a fantastic product at the right price. Why should being a member of this club make any difference to that normal business transaction? And don't forget, we run a huge deficit in trade with the EU. I think they would be the first hammering on the door to say, please Britain, let's continue this free trade agreement. It's good for both of us. So that would be whether Britain stayed in the EU or left the EU. And in so doing, we would have the opportunity of expanding our horizons and looking around the world.
Damien Green, Craig's making the point that the UK is big enough to stand on its own 2 feet without being a member of the European Union. What do you say to that?
It's a question of balance of advantage, and Tim Allen is completely right. He's a classic manufacturing business, internationally competitive. The last thing he needs is uncertainty. And even if we could get as good terms as we get now, which I suspect we wouldn't, just psychologically, the European the other countries in the European Union would not take kindly to Britain pulling out. Why is it not in the interests of German, French manufacturers to say, let's try and tweak the terms of trade a bit so they're put at a disadvantage? Even if we could get that, it would take us years to get there. That uncertainty would stop inward investment, it would chill growth in our economy, and it would cause damage. And of course, being a member of the European Union doesn't stop us trading with the rest of the world. The Germans, for example, are extremely good at trading with China. They do better than we do. So anything that's holding us back from trading with the rest of the world isn't our membership of the European Union. We need to look at our own issues there, training, competitiveness and so on, and deal with those domestically.
As the most important political story of the year was clearly the referendum, we decided to go on the road and find out more. First, we climbed on board the Brexit battle bus with Nigel Farage. You wouldn't be surprised to hear that the topic that most concerns people is immigration either.
Well, of course it is. Kent's on the front lines. Kent's on the front lines of legal immigration and, of course, illegal immigration too. And I think people feel that they've been let down by governments who never explained to them what free movement within the European Union would actually mean to their lives. And as far as illegal immigration is concerned, and the situation at Dymchurch and elsewhere, well, frankly, our government is pathetic.
Do we want our country back? Are we going to win this referendum next Thursday?
What I'm supporting is us governing our own country. We didn't do badly for 1,000 years until we joined the European Economic Community, and I want that control of our lives back, our democracy back, our borders back, our self-confidence back, and I believe that following a vote for Brexit, we'll all walk down the street half an inch taller, feeling a bit prouder about who we are.
Next on our itinerary was a visit to the European Parliament in Strasbourg to find out exactly what goes on. We talked to two South East MEPs who needed no encouragement to set out their stalls on staying in and heading for the exit door. Now, Dan, why would Kent be better off if we left the European Union?
Well, Kent would be better off in the most literal sense, financial sense. Britain as a whole pays in £19 billion a year gross, 11 billion net to the EU. But that figure is higher for Kent. Kent pays in more as a relatively affluent part of the UK and with customs duties, and gets back relatively less. So to put this in context, we gave the EU more than we saved in the whole of the austerity programme in the last Parliament. Actually, we'd have had enough to wipe out all the cuts and still take a penny off income tax.
I'm sure you've got a different view, Catherine Bearder. You'd like Kent as the gateway Europe to stay in place where it is.
It is where we know that we will have a stronger economy. Dan has talked about the figures and that proportionately what people of Kent pay in, but they pay that in because we are such a dynamo of an economy. We have the port of Dover. Anybody who's seen the lorries coming and going from either the train or the boats will know that we are a really important part of the European economy. We cut ourselves off from that, then our economy takes a nosedive.
Is it a risk too far? Is it a leap too far, Dan Hannan?
Well, I mean, there are quite a lot of risks with staying in. People need to ask what are the negative consequences of a Remain vote, where you are acquiescing in everything that's coming our way, inviting the EU to carry on legislating more. Catherine just mentioned the Port of Dover. That's a very good example. The Port of Dover, like every other port, is threatened by the EU's Ports Services Directive that was suspended until after the UK referendum. Every British MEP voted against it, and we were outvoted, and it's the last thing we need.
That is a directive for state-owned ports. We are not a state-owned port in Dover or in Southampton. So we will be excluded. And Daniel, if you did your job here in the Parliament and actually attended committee meetings, we would have a voice
Hang on,
here.
what you're saying is just not true.
No,
what you're saying is not true. We moved an amendment to exempt private ports, and it was defeated.
Perhaps you would just let me get a word in. You say that we are bossed around by Europe. We are not. We are here in the European Union, standing up. We as MEPs are here representing the people of Kent in all those decisions. We are affecting legislation in 28 different countries. Outside the European Union, we would be shouting on the white cliffs of Dover saying, and us, and us.
Although the Stay campaign group, and the message seems to be, our economy would benefit. But
so
we're a
much.
strong economy already, so why can't we stand on our
No,
own 2
we are
feet?
a strong economy because we have those trading links with the European Union. We are culturally stronger, where the young people can travel, older people can retire, we can move about. The traffic and the flow across Europe is enormous, and that gives us huge benefit. You ask any farmer that's relying on fruit pickers to come and help him out. You look at the hospitals, how many of those doctors and nurses come from other European countries?
It is true, Dan Hannan, isn't it, that a lot of migrant workers fill gaps in the job market which wouldn't get filled if we had to fill.
And I think that should continue. I think it's really important that we have an element of free movement of labour, but we should be ultimately in control. And I think what people, particularly in Kent, which has been on the front line in terms of migration, which has had the hostels and so on, what people really resent is not immigration, right? We've always had immigration in this country. We've always accepted that we can be refreshed and enriched by the energy of people coming from elsewhere. But we want to feel that we are in charge of roughly who comes in and roughly in what numbers. And that's what we don't have as long as we're in the EU.
We are in charge. We are not in the Schengen Agreement. Nobody can get into our country unless they have a passport.
People generally don't like change that they don't know what the consequences of it will be. What would you say to those people who feel it's a risk too far? Because that's obviously an issue for the for the Leave camp.
Oh, sure. I mean, you know, the other side of making it all about fear, that's the one card they're playing. There are risks and uncertainties whatever we do, right? If we stay in, what are our budget contributions going to be 5-10 years from now? How many migrants will we have had to have taken? How many more euro bailouts will we have been dragged into? There are lots of uncertainties if we vote to stay in. The one certainty is that a country in control of its own borders, its own taxes, its own money, its own destiny is safer.
We would be isolated. We have right of access. It's access all areas. We can trade anywhere within the European Union.
Carry on. What you mean is that our jobs will disappear. That's what's
Daniel,
bothering
stop keep interrupting me.
Catherine, I'll give you the final word, which won't obviously be the final word because we've got some time to go before the outcome. But
yeah, we have lots of words, and I think it is confusing for people who haven't understood or taken or even bothered with the European issue.
So what's your message to those people?
So my message is, find out what are the things that really interest you. Find out if it's fashion or it's farming or it's music or whatever it is that interests you. Find out how that would be affected. We have no knowledge of what would happen. It's the people like Daniel are like lemmings that want to run off the cliff. I know that I am working here for the people of Kent and making life better for them. The people I speak to want to know that their future is secure, safe and prosperous, and we will only have that if we are full members of the European Union.
As the Rio Olympics got underway, the Sports Minister and Kent MP Tracy Crouch came into the studio to discuss whether the legacy from the London Games had been realised in the form of greater participation. Joining her on the red sofa was Stephanie Holt, the Sports Development Director for Kent County Council. Your new sports strategy says that the way of measuring success shouldn't be done on medals anymore or the crude participation numbers. You want a different way of evaluating it. Can you explain why you've changed that approach?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm really proud of the sports strategy. It's the first time we've had a new sports strategy for over a decade. And I think it was time to look again at how we deliver and measure sport in the country. And the fact is that while medal count is incredibly important, because as I said before, actually elite athletes do inspire the next generation. The truth is we want to also make sure that we're getting people who have never been active involved in some sort of physical activity. And that's why actually good local authorities will continue to invest in sport and leisure, because they know that if they do so and they get people active and they take them away from their isolation environments, that actually it will reduce budgets in other more expensive areas such as health and adult social care.
Well, you say that, but your government is cutting the amount of grants that goes to councils.
But it's up to local authorities to decide where they invest that money, and that's my point. It's not for us as central government to dictate to local authorities by and large where they spend their money. Good local authorities like Medway and KCC have actually continued to invest in sport because actually they know that where that investment counts is in other more expensive budgets. So if you get somebody out who is perhaps, for example, on the verge of being diagnosed with diabetes, we know that physical activity can reduce, if not completely reverse diabetes. And now diabetes is a very expensive condition and actually can end up having an impact on other local authority budgets. So actually what we're trying to do is encourage people to think of leisure and sport as a means of dealing with other health concerns across the area.
Undoubtedly one of the most controversial topics of the year were grammar schools, after new Prime Minister Theresa May pledged to reverse a ban on new ones. Popular with some but loathed by others, the policy came up against some fierce political resistance. Duarte Diaz had the story.
Theresa May's plans to introduce a new wave of grammar schools has triggered the age-old debate over the pros and cons of grammar school education. Grammar schools were introduced with the Education Act of 1944 alongside secondary modern schools. In Kent, we have more grammar schools than most areas in the UK, accounting for 33 of 163 in England. Children are selected for grammar schools according to the Kent test that they take at the age of 11, a test that Kent Education Network disagree with. Dr. Alan Bainbridge, a senior lecturer at the Canterbury Christ Church University School of Childhood and Educational Studies, is an affiliate of this network.
I think the whole notion of testing someone's aptitude at the age of 10, I think it's a little bit silly, actually. It doesn't make sense. There is no evidence that it's accurate and that it works. And as I said, I don't think it makes sense as far as, is this something we want to do to young people at the age of 10, to give them a test over a couple of hours, to now put them into different buildings with different peers to follow different careers from the age of 10. I don't think this makes sense at all.
2 years ago, Sevenoaks Grammar School managed to work around legislation that prevented it from building new grammar schools by planning to build an annex instead, and construction started this year. The desire to get children to pass the test has led to a whole network of paid institutions advertising high Kent test pass rates. Peter Reid is an independent education advisor that supports families who has worked in Kent's education system for 43 years.
I loathe tutoring, but I would advise that some tutoring takes place, but not to the extent that it's happening in this county. Do you realise that there are some children who are tutored from the age of 5 to get into a grammar school? It's madness and totally unnecessary. Of course, the elephant in the room is private education, because if there weren't grammar schools, the private sector would expand to meet the need and the demand from parents for a selective education, and the chasm between state and private education would grow. We can already see how leaders from private education are starting to dominate more and more this country's affairs.
However, what Dr. Bainbridge and Mr. Reid both agree is that this debate is just a smokescreen for a much larger and detrimental issue affecting not only schools in Kent, but all across the United Kingdom. Duarte is reporting for KMTV.
With the government announcing plans for more affordable homes, just what are the challenges of coping with growing developments in the Garden of England? MP Helen Whaley for Faversham and Mid-Kent and Kentish Gazette editor Leo Whitlock discussed the issue. Why does infrastructure appear to a lot of people to be an afterthought almost? If you look at places like Maidstone, the number of homes being built there, you don't see any accompanying infrastructure which is going to help people move around, get in and out of
Well, that's been exactly my frustration and the disagreement I've been having with Maidstone Borough Council, where there's this huge amount of building going on without the equivalent, the required investment in the road network. And I say to them, well, you know, what investment is needed in that road network? Tell me, and I'll go and lobby the Chancellor for that. So what we need is the councils to define how much help they need on infrastructure.
Leo, Canterbury City Council's got fairly ambitious plans for house building. Do you think it's got the infrastructure question right?
Probably not. I think they're looking for it with rose-tinted glasses. So Mountfield Park, a big development in the south of Canterbury. The City Council sees that people are going to cycle in, get buses, use public transport. I'm not sure they're just being realistic enough to know that people actually are not going to ditch their cars. They are going to use them. They're going to head towards Canterbury. So they need to find a way around that.
By the end of the year, UKIP was still struggling to find someone to replace Nigel Farage. For a brief moment, it seemed as though a successor might have come from Kent. But who? Thanet Council leader Chris Wells kept his cards close to his chest when asked if he would put his name forward. Labour opposition leader Vince Maple joined us on the couch to talk about the future of UKIP's post-leadership future. After the Brexit vote, you know, I don't want to be too blunt, but what's the point of UKIP?
Oh, however many times I've been asked that question since the June the 23rd is quite remarkable. And it's asked usually by media commentators or political opponents or or even one of the endless list of worthy academics that appear in front of books to make themselves sound learned. And, you know, the truth is, we have not yet even begun the process of Brexit. I think that many of the voters who voted for Brexit during the course of the referendum campaign don't wholeheartedly or thoroughly trust the way the Conservatives may deliver it. So there's a very clear role for the next couple of years, and from that point onwards, there's an even clearer role to develop a vision of what Britain outside the European Union might actually look like.
Yes, well, I'm sure Vince has got something to say about this.
Yeah, I mean, wow, there you go. That was Chris, and he had some views. And let me just give you some response to some of those views. UKIP across the board, whether it's nationally or internationally with what's happened over the last 7 days, they seem to be a party in disarray. And I think
that is a fair point, isn't it, Chris? That, you know, you don't appear as a party to be terribly united. The only time, the party seems to have a grip on things is when Nigel Farage is there and leading the party.
I think that it's pretty clear cut, isn't it? I mean, anybody who was going to have to follow Nigel Farage in terms of being leader of UKIP was always going to have a pretty tough job.
Do you fancy a tilt at the job yourself, Chris?
Well, when it first came up, I suggested we were doing so. And of course, now it's rerun, and I'll have my 2-year membership and qualified this month. So, you know, watch this space. You never know.
He hasn't. Chris Wells hasn't denied that, Paul. I know he hasn't denied that.
But seriously. With Brexit continuing to dominate British and European politics, attention was turning to the arguments over whether MPs should get a say on when Article 50 should be triggered, and whether they should vote on the terms of a deal. We brought together the Sittingbourne and Sheppey Conservative MP Gordon Henderson and Senior Labour County Councillor Roger Truelove to discuss the issue, and passions ran high.
The question was, should we leave the EU? And the answer was, yes.
And we all accept that.
And that's what we're going to be doing.
We all accept that.
How we actually do that, how we negotiate that, that's for the government and government ministers to decide.
So you don't want to say, suppose there comes up with a deal which you don't agree with. How are you going to make your position heard?
It is. The first question is, are we going to leave the EU? And that question has been answered. Yes, we are going to leave the EU. The only way we can do that is by triggering Article 50. And that's what the government is saying, not the negotiation. The government has already said, when it comes to negotiations, that will be discussed in Parliament. Parliament will have an eventual decision. It is whether we trigger Article 50. And that should be for the government to do, and it should be done now.
Why not, as in a democracy, have that debate open in the open and transparent so people can...
We don't need that debate about whether we trigger Article 50, because it's already been accepted by Roger that we will leave the EU. The only way we can do that is by triggering Article 50.
You're worried that you're going to lose a vote in the
Commons?
No,
I'm more than happy to have a vote. I'm more than happy to have a vote, because actually I think we will, and I actually think we will have a vote. I think we will have to have a vote because the court has ruled that we will have a vote, and I suspect the Supreme Court will uphold that. That's my view.
Can I ask,
yes, of course.
Do you want us to stay in the single market? Do you want us to stay in the single market?
I want us to leave the EU.
Can you have a yes or no to, do we want to stay in the single market?
If to leave the EU, we have got to leave the single market, then yes, we leave the single market.
What about the customs union?
We have to negotiate different parts of what agreements we currently have with them. Now, I believe we should leave the EU, and I believe the EU...
Agree that,
but Roger, I mean, you'll know that some people are saying there's an agenda here.
There is.
That is all about trying to frustrate the process and trying to stop the referendum.
And are you both saying that the government isn't capable of dealing with that in Parliament, that they haven't got the political skills?
No, listen.
Surely they must.
Roger, I'm in Parliament. I know the way these things work, and I know full well that just down the corridor for us, there's a chamber there of unelected peers who will try and frustrate this as much as they can. I look at the MPs on the opposition benches, the Lib Dems, all 8 of them, and the Labour Party, and some on the Conservative benches, all of whom will bend over backwards to try to frustrate this.
Gordon, this court ruling is about process, isn't it? It's not about the decision. So
it's about process.
Whatever happens, you're going to get what you want, effectively.
I think we will get, if we have a vote, I think we will win that vote, because I think there are a lot of Labour MPs who will look at the majorities in their constituencies who realise that if they vote and try to frustrate the British public,
they will be out on their own.
There's absolutely no intention of doing that. The Labour MPs will accept the vote of the British public.
So why don't we just trigger Article 50 straight away? Why do you expect us to have a vote on that?
There is a decent argument about parliamentary sovereignty, which is what you wanted wanted to get back, to actually have some idea about the strategy that the government intends to follow. And
that's nothing to do with, like, that is it's a red herring.
What, the whole of our economy is a red herring?
No, you've just said, Roger, you have said that we will leave the EU. So the government has to trigger Article 50 to do that. That's the only way we can live it. Now, thereafter, I accept there are arguments to be had about.
Okay, let's give Roger a final word on this.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think the members of Parliament are entitled to know whether the unelected Prime Minister that we've got will try and defend our economy in Europe.
Elected, by the way.
And I don't think they're being able to do that. It's not about whether we leave the European Commission or the European Parliament. It's about whether we keep access to the single market, which is so vital for our pharmaceuticals, our car industry.
And after all that, 2016 ended with as much uncertainty as it had begun. So here's a reminder of the political twists and turns of 2016 by Duarte Diaz.
If there's one thing we can all agree on, is that politics this year got a bit crazy. For the second time, Britain took to the polls to decide on its membership on the European Union with a referendum. The Leave campaign warned us about Britain's breaking point and other dangers of staying in the Union. The now infamous campaign bus promised £350 million a week for the NHS if Britain voted to leave. Meanwhile, the Better In campaign hoped the fear of post-Brexit economic disaster would convince people to vote Remain.
I need European business, I need European goodwill, and I need European customers.
And even Barack Obama pitched in. For about 3 months, both sides battled it out on the road, in the press, and even on the River Thames. But it all came down to that one day, the 23rd of June, when Britain voted to leave the EU. For Nigel Farage and his campaign, it was Independence Day. For those in favour of the EU, disappointment. David Cameron abandoned ship by stepping down as Prime Minister, so it was up to the Conservative Party to choose a new one. It wasn't an easy job description, having to begin the Brexit negotiations, but Theresa May was up for the challenge. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage claimed victory and then resigned as leader of UKIP, saying his job was done. Or so he thought. His replacement Diana James quit after only 18 days, which put Farage back on the leadership. It wasn't until November that Paul Nuttall took the reins of UKIP. On the Labour side, Jeremy Corbyn's leadership was seriously questioned when his party held a vote of no confidence against him. But the leader of the party held his ground and managed to survive another leadership election. In the background, the Green Party also changed the leadership and the Lib Dems managed to win back a seat in the Commons. Across the pond, the United States stunned the world by electing Donald Trump as their president, and our very own Nigel Farage made sure he was there to endorse the result. While 2016 is not over just yet, we can hope the holidays bring some peace to politics.
Well, that ends our roundup of 2016, and if there's one thing we can probably be sure of, it's that the last 12 months have been the most unpredictable in politics for some time. As to what may happen in 2017, well, that's anyone's guess. But we'll be back in January to find out. Our first show of the year will be January the 22nd, where, who knows, we might be in for a snap election. We'll see you then.